All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the WinUI Community Call. Hopefully this is working. You can all hear me. You can't see me today, but I'm Anna. I'm a program manager on the WinUI team. So let me just get started. We have a lot of great content today that I want to get right into. So our WinUI Community Calls are on the third Wednesday of every month. The next one is actually going to be a bit exciting. We're planning on doing a bonus community call. So it will be an hour straight of Q&A. Just to answer all of your burning questions about Preview 1 after you guys have sort of, had the chance to get your hands on it for a few weeks. We will be announcing that date once we finalize it here. And here you can find our links for GitHub and Twitter as well. So let me breeze through this agenda really quickly. Today, we have my intro and agenda. We have Ryan, our team lead, who's going to be talking all about WinUI 3 Preview 1. Super exciting, just came out yesterday. He's going to be talking about the capabilities, limitations, and roadmap updates. Then Miguel from our team is going to do a deeper dive into a demo of Preview 1. We have Michael Hawker here giving us some updates on the Windows Community Toolkit. And we also have Morten Nielsen, who a lot of you guys must recognize. He is a Microsoft MVP, and he's also been working, he works for Esri, and they've been doing some awesome stuff for WinUI, so he's going to show off some of that stuff. And last, but definitely not least, we have Uno Platform here, who's going to show off all the amazing things that they're doing with WinUI. So, quickly, what is WinUI? WinUI is the native UI platform for Windows 10. You can use it to build rich .NET and C++ apps for Windows 10 devices. So WinUI powers the Windows and Xbox OS shell and many apps and platforms like Xamarin Forms and React Native for Windows, which I believe was just, there have been a lot of sessions on this stuff at Build, so I'm sure a lot of you guys know all about this stuff now. So we have WinUI 2 and WinUI 3. WinUI 2 is a library of Fluent-based controls and styles, and these work in UWP XAML apps. So updates to WinUI 2 ship quarterly, and the team actually just recently released WinUI 2.4, which was exciting and full of, cool new controls. WinUI 3 is actually a dramatic expansion of WinUI 2 into a full-fledged end-to-end UI framework. So WinUI 3 provides the latest Fluent design styling. It's built to support modern hardware input and devices, and it can be used with .NET or C++ apps, can be used to create desktop or UWP apps, and we just shipped Preview 1 yesterday, which, as I said, super exciting. So, up first, we have Ryan, who is going to talk about the capabilities and limitations of WinUI 3 Preview 1. So, Ryan, do you want to just chime in here?
Yeah, and I'll be pretty brief here just because we have kind of a star-studded cast for this community call with lots of exciting people to chime in, and I don't want to monopolize the time. So, as Anna mentioned, Preview 1 came out yesterday. The headliner of Preview 1, or the biggest thing that it offers, is that it works in any type of app now. So it still works in UWP apps, just like the alphas did. And then it also works in Win32 or desktop-style apps as well for the very first time. It's our first preview that expands to work in Win32 apps. So there's certainly going to be gremlins and gotchas in there. It will be fantastic when the community starts hammering on this. Bug reports, actually, it would be really great if we could get those quickly because we're going to do a Preview 2 in a month, and it's going to basically be like an update to Preview 1. So the sort of top issues, we want to go and get those in. Preview 1 has a good chunk of the stuff from WinUI 2 in it. It also has a bunch of new capabilities, including swap chain panel, and the XAML controls gallery app has also been updated to use Preview 1, so you can see how that works as well. I want to talk a little bit about some of the known issues and limitations. So first of all, don't use it in production apps. It's not forward compatible, and what that means is at some point, an update to the Windows 10 OS is going to come and it's going to break Preview 1 essentially from running. So it's really just something that's meant to be explored and not really something that you should be using in production apps in any way. There's also a few other restrictions. So the content can only be hosted in one window, or there can only be one tree of content within the apps process. And that's obviously a crazy restriction, but that's all that we have stood up thus far in Win32. And so when we advance the previews, we'll take that restriction away. That's not going to be like a final restriction for RTM, but it at least lets you sort of dip your toe in and give a shot with having like a single window of WinUI 3 content in there that you can sort of play and mess around with. It also doesn't include islands. Hopefully we'll be adding islands. Like, my fingers are crossed for maybe Preview 3 at Ignite. We'll see if we can get to that. And so XAML Islands allows you to combine a couple of different UI frameworks in the same window. So for example, you can have like WinForms content and WinUI content side by side, and we know that that's a really important thing for people who want to sort of gradually upgrade their apps. But it doesn't have islands right now. And there's a few other restrictions as well. A lot of the tooling support isn't in place, so it's like very, very basic tooling right now. And we'll have improvements that we need to make to tooling over time. But you know, it lets you try things out. So check out the release notes, and if there's questions at the end, we can answer those too. And just to also give you a bit of an update to our WinUI roadmap. So a few things changed on here from the last time that we showed this. I can't remember if it was this last call or the call before, but basically probably the two things to really call out here, maybe three things to call out. One, obviously Preview 1 released yesterday, so it's available now and you can play with it. In summer or sort of early fall, we're hoping to get open source, and this is pretty consistent with what we've been saying all along. We've been, getting open source is a high priority for us. I'd say maybe even notching up in priority because of something that I'll mention in just a minute. But that open source means all the XAML code, and then also how we plan and track our work. So we really want to get to the point where we can engage with you in our repository, and we're fixing private API calls and trying to get the team ready through processes for open source. So there's like a pretty big effort to get to that place, but we think we're still pretty much on track for like late summer or early fall. And then the last main thing to call out is we've been saying for a while now that we think we're going to do sort of like an RTM or a general availability in November. And that is probably that we're not going to call that general availability RTM anymore. We're just going to call it Preview 4. The main reason being that we don't think we can get to parity with everything that UWP XAML can do by November. So we'll just keep calling it a preview, and we'll keep adding features until eventually we think we do have that parity. Preview 4 will still be stable and forward compatible, so you can build, it'll be the first version that you can build production apps on. So even if it doesn't have every feature, if it's got all the features that you need or enough features for you to use, then you'll be able to use that in production apps. That's pretty much all I had to cover.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Definitely good info to know for anybody who's interested in WinUI, which is hopefully everybody in this call. So now I'm going to hand it off for a quick minute to Michael Hawker, who is the maintainer of the Windows Community Toolkit, senior software engineer at Microsoft. A lot of you may know him as the XAML Llama. He was on our call last time. Michael, I can hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Anna. Appreciate the intro. Please follow me on Twitter or Twitch. I do dev streams, so I've got one coming up later today, actually at noon Pacific Daylight Time. Going to do some bug fixes and PRs for the Windows Community Toolkit. If you need to know more about Windows Community Toolkit and how I work with the WinUI team, check out the recording of last month's call. We went over all that in detail. But with that, I just have a couple quick news updates I wanted to share this month. So yesterday, alongside the WinUI 3 preview, we also shipped a version of the toolkit in preview that also supports that Preview 1 release. So you can check that out at the aka.ms/wct-winui3 link. That'll have all the instructions and details of setting you up not only with the WinUI 3 project and all the dependencies you need for that, but how you can test out the toolkit components and controls and extensions and helpers that we have in the toolkit on top of WinUI 3. It's really exciting. I'd say like 80 to 90% of the toolkit is just working at this point. The main limitation, which we've noted in the notes there, is anything that uses Win2D right now. Win2D doesn't support WinUI 3 yet, and so that anything that the toolkit relies on that doesn't work at the moment. But pretty much everything else does. If you find any issues, let us know. The project itself is part of the .NET Foundation. It's all MIT licensed. We do everything open in the open source. So we have a lot of bugs and issues. Happy to have more people jump on. I just actually released on my YouTube channel a guide about how you can start building with the toolkit and contributing that way. So please feel free to check that out if you're interested in jumping in the open source. And then the last little piece of news is that we also released a preview to our upcoming 6.1 release. So you can find out more info about that at that other AKMS link down below. And then we're planning to ship that on June 4th now. So lots of interesting, exciting stuff we're doing with the Community Toolkit. A lot of cool stuff coming in our 6.1 release. It's probably one of our biggest releases in a long time. So we're really excited about that. A lot of cool updates across the board of the toolkit. So great. Thanks for letting me on the call, and I'll be around to answer questions. So if you have any, let me know.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. So yeah, everybody, the Windows Community Toolkit is really cool. Go check it out at this big blue link up here. But now I'll be moving on to Miguel, who is going to do a little bit of a deep dive demo into Preview 1. So Miguel, you can go ahead and share your screen. I'm just going to go back to the Teams call here. All right.
I'll do it right now. First, okay. I want to say several things. Hello there. Thank you so much for tuning in. These 2 days are being fantastic for us because we want to share with you all the illusion, energy, and passion that WinUI team put in the Preview 1. As you already know, WinUI Preview 1 allows you to create WinUI apps that run on desktop besides UWP. This is really huge for you. This is something that the developer community asked, and we listened. So you will be able to create apps that run with exactly the same execution conditions that NFC, WinForms, and WPF. I mean, no sandbox, no app container, using the Win32 app model, running in a Win32 type process, and allows you to access all the Win32 APIs and .NET 5 APIs. So let me share the desktop and show you some demos. Here we are. So the first things that you need to use WinUI is install Visual Studio 2019 16.7 Preview 1. It doesn't work in another older version. You have to be this specific version and ahead, the 16.7 and Preview 1. You also need to install the .NET 5 Preview 4 for 86 and 64 for both. After that, you can install the V6, the V6 that contains the WinUI project templates. Let me show you where you can get all this stuff. This is the WinUI library Preview 1. This is the release notice. You will find all the instruction here. So you can find how you can install the Visual Studio, how you can install the .NET Preview 4, the V6, everything is in here. Once that you install all this stuff, you can go to Visual Studio. Let me open Visual Studio. It's in my another monitor. Let me move to this monitor. When you create a new project, you will encounter a lot of new WinUI project templates. You can filter the WinUI project templates for using the WinUI tag. And then you will see that we have for C#, and also we have another bunch of templates for C++. Basically, the two project templates that I'm going to use today are these two, the one for C++ and another one for C#. When you click the one of that, then is the expected thing, so you can create your new app. We are very short of time, so I'm not going to create an application from scratch because I want to show you several things, several advantages. But instead of creating a blank, the thing that I'm going to do is just show you the demos that I was using the build talk. It's super simple, but good enough to show you some advantages of WinUI 3 in desktop. The idea was to create a simple app that people can understand in like in 30 seconds. So I didn't apply any kind of good practices like the MVVM pattern, just did it even handlers, but it works for the demo proposal. And the good thing is I really make public these demos in this Microsoft WinUI 3 demos GitHub site. So you can go there and you will find the C# demo and the C++ demo. Let me go to the first one, for example, the C#. So this is a .NET 5 C# WinUI app. Is .NET 5 because you go to the project, you will see that we are using this new type of SDK prototype. We are no longer using for desktop, for .NET Desktop, the old Monster of Frankenstein project system. We are using this new thing, which is something that people can understand. And you see that we are using here .NET 5. Another interesting point is, yes, we are using the NuGet package for WinUI. This is the latest version that we already published yesterday. One interesting point I want to highlight is that the WinUI comes with something called C# WinRT. C# WinRT is the new type of projections. Is a projection something like a translation between the standard C# code into WinRT type classes. Means that you can call the WinRT types using just the standard C# types. The cool thing about this NuGet package of the C# WinRT is it comes with some specific tool called CS-WinRT.exit that is doing all this work for you and also generating an interrupt assembly. And this interrupt assembly should be something like in here. This is the WinRT runtime. Good. So what else I can show you? When you create a WinUI app, it comes with this package project. And the reason why we include this package project is just for convenience for you. For the preview one, we only going to support the packaging apps. Means that you need to package your .NET 5 or C++ app WinUI inside of an MSIX package. Yeah, because something that I had to do every single time that you are creating a WinUI 3 app, we create this just for you. Everything was set up. This project has a reference to this demo build and doing all this stuff. When you build the app, is executing from here. Some interesting points about the WinUI desktop app is that we adding new functionalities to do with the Windows class. In the Windows class, we allow to create this window using the markup, which is super convenient, and also is exactly the same thing that we are doing in WPF apps. Another thing is this window class is an abstraction from the low-level implementation of the window. For example, if you are running your app using the UWP app model, is using the core window implementation internally. But if you are running this app in a Win32 app model, is using the HWing. And because this is using an HWing, you can grab the HWing and do a lot of stuff with this HWing. I will show you this later. But first, I want to also talk about this XAML application object. This XAML application object is not exactly the same XAML application object that we have in the UWP or it's something that we expand this object to make it work in Win32 as well. So now we can use exactly the same class for Win32 and UWP. There is some event like on suspending that this event is going to be fired in the when you are running this app in the UWP app model, but it's going to be ignored in the Win32 app model. We hope that in the future with the project reunion, there is some kind of unification of the app model, and you can get fired this event regardless of the app model. Good. More stuff that I want to show you in here is that, yep, I can get a window handle because this is a Win32 app model. Once that I get my window cleared, I go into my XAML code to show you all this code. I can use all the functionality that you can use today in UWP and WinUI 2. And also you can use expanding all the expected stuff. In here in my application, you will see how, let me just jump into there, how I'm using this window handle, and because I get the window handle, I can call the Win32 API directly without any kind of a container or restriction. For instance, okay, I don't get it here, but for instance, I can call, let me jump into that. I can call the, where we are, there we are. I can call this Win32 API, which is show window, to minimize or maximize the windows. As you see, I'm using a paint bucket here, and also I can use this Win32 API like the set window pause to move the window to the bottom, for example. Good. When you're running this app, let me run the app. You will see that I can just query the directories without any kind of restrictions over there. Let me just do a little path. I can call the processes. I can call these Win32 APIs I told you before. For example, I can maximize my app. I can just minimize just calling the Win32 APIs. Great. Let me just switch to the C++ project. This is exactly the same UI, exactly the same application, not exactly the same application, it's exactly the same UI, but I'm using a different set of APIs. I'm using the Win32 APIs directly because I don't have the .NET framework, so I need to use the Win32 APIs. What you see in here is the application object is exactly the same, but I'm using the C++ WinRT, the C++ 17 standard. I'm also using the C++ WinRT projection to help me just to create all these types. So as you see, there is nothing weird here, just a standard C++. And also, I get exactly the same events, exactly the same types, exactly the same thing that you can see in the C#. My code behind for my window object, you will see in here that I'm, for example, using this open process open process API and the union process module just to query the module as well. And here I'm using the iFile open dialog, something that the developer was using for years and years and years, and you can reuse it in here as well because it's a pure C++ app. But I'm using exactly the same XAML markup. Look at that, it's beautiful. You can create your C++ native UI using XAML. And another interesting thing is I use exactly the same APIs that are using the C# project, but in C++. Great, so if I run this app, you will expect exactly the same app, which is exactly the same behavior. It's super cool, I really love it. Good, several things I want to just to highlight. One is, yeah, the code is in here in WinUI 3 demos, all this code I show you today. You want to learn more about the WinUI, you can also go into the WinUI XAML control gallery that I showed you Ryan before, but also making sure that you switch the branch. You have to use the branch WinUI 3 preview. When you switch the branch, you will get the XAML control gallery running in Win32. Let me click. This is the XAML controls gallery running Win32, and also you will find new functionalities like the input validation in here. So WinUI 3 application can get this input validation as well, plus another stuff. So you can take a look and you can validate exactly if some functionality is working today in WinUI 3 in desktop or it's not working there. And I think that is all I wanted to share today. I'll send you back with Anna. Happy XAML coding, friends.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Miguel. I think just personally being on this team for so long and seeing this really come to life, wow, that is so exciting. It's so cool. Okay. So next up, we have Morten, who, if you want to just go ahead and share your screen, Morton. Morton is a Microsoft MVP, and he has been working on the ArcGIS runtime at Esri. And I'm really excited to see what he's going to present for us today. And as a lot of you may know or may not know, he is on Twitter at @.morton. So I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks. Do you see my screen okay?
Yep.
All right. Yeah. So I got an opportunity to work a little bit with the WinUI project. And I did that as part of the ArcGIS Runtime SDK that I'm one of the developers on. And so what that SDK is really meant for like GIS apps. That means like anything like kind of spatial data for analyzing the data, managing and collecting data, but also visualizing the data. And for WinUI, that's the visualization part is really important for us. We often have like huge amount of data we need to show and render at the best performance we can get. And this API is actually mostly built in C++. All the low-level rendering and data analysis is all in C++, and then we write a nice little .NET wrapper on top, and then we expose it as. We do it for other platforms too, like iOS and Android native, but I'm only focused on the .NET part. So we can take that code and run it on WPF or UWP or also Xamarin as well. And that means there's a huge amount of code reuse across all the platforms, and certain things that we can or can't do on different platforms. So for us, was something I already loved about UWP is that swap chain panel we get. It has really great performance. We get really great touch performance, and it's something that honestly we haven't really touched it since we started using it in Windows 8. It's been running solid. There's no issues with going to remote desktop and different devices, and a similar one in WPF, which is based on a lot older technology, we definitely had a lot more work on getting that to perform and so on. So we really like the swap chain panel. But one of the things we have kind of a problem with is a lot of our customers, they have these huge amounts of data that they just want to load in. And the sandbox makes that a little bit tricky because we can't just read anywhere on the file system. You would have to either take those files and copy them inside the sandbox, or we would have to rewrite a lot of our file APIs to work with those file APIs that can read outside the sandbox. And that gets pretty tricky when you're dealing with lots and lots of also third-party libraries, like SQLite, for instance, or a lot of the stuff that reads imagery like PNG and JPEGs and all those things that it would be hard for us to rewrite. So historically, the sandbox actually prevented some scenarios for us. And with Win32, I don't really have to worry so much about that because I can get out of the sandbox pretty easily. So I actually want to show really quickly a demo I have. Here's actually my little code. There's what we call the scene view control. This is basically what renders a 3D scene. And usually you have to split view, have all this common WinUI stuff, number box, and so on and so forth. And I showed this briefly. There was briefly recording in Ryan's session, which is not coming up right now. Oh, there we go. So here's basically that app. And I hope that performance comes through pretty well over Teams. But I get very, very smooth rendering performance. I have, of course, a drop down here is all typical WinUI controls. We can do something like we have a number box here to change our vertical exaggeration. We can times 5. That might be a little bit too much. But let's change that back to something more normal and realistic. But where it becomes important is actually when I want to load data. So I have this about almost 500 megabytes of buildings. And when I load that, it loads fairly fast using the little teaching tip here as a sort of notification. But I still get this great performance, and I just read this straight in. Normally, historically, I would have to take these files and copy the inside the sandbox first before I could open. Now I have duplicate data set that might also make it tricky for us to maintain. If I want to do edits to this data, I have to sync it back out again. But Win32, I just read them straight up. So it's really, really great. Can have, of course, a little slider here. This is all the split view control we can play with. Here's Petco Park in San Diego. If you want to go really crazy, I have this almost 1.5 gigabytes of laser data, and this honestly loads sort of impressively fast to me. So here's a little over 200 million individual points. So let's kind of zoom in here, some of the trees, and you can kind of see these are just individual points. And they're all rendered based on the elevation of each point. So as it gets higher up, you get higher, a different color towards red. You can go in Balboa Park, for instance, here. And I still get this really, really impressive performance with the swap chain panel. I also get great touch. I can actually check my Xbox controller, which I thought was kind of fun to work with. So I can kind of fly out and in. And that gives us a really cool, fun experience with an. I can do one little flight simulator here and make everyone really, really seasick. So it's something we're really excited about. It definitely enables some scenarios that we couldn't do before, and get this really, really, really cool rendering performance. So yeah, and it's really just not very much work to do this. I did a couple of little notes of some of the stuff we did. For most of the part, like if I were converting an app, I really just had to replace Windows UI Assemble, Microsoft UI Assemble. That took care of probably 95% of all the code changes I had to do. I did have to do some work with this part too. Like we had made some sort of wrong assumption. Like if I'm on .NET Framework, I can assume I have access to WPF type. If I'm on UWP, I can assume I have access to some UWP UI types, and that meant I had to break my code a little bit more apart. So that's something you might want to think about, that now you actually have a UI framework that can run both on .NET Core and on UWP. So if you have your code already splayed out, that might be helpful. I took a little snapshot and kind of go really crazy. Like I ended up doing a bunch of defines because I reused my code across all the platforms we support. And so I basically abstract that away in the header just by declaring, if I'm on WinUI, use the Microsoft namespace. If I'm on UWP, use the Windows namespace in general. And there's some Android and iOS stuff too in WPF. So that's typically some of the experiences I had with doing this. And so a lot of the stuff I showed you can already do with UWP today. It's just the Win32 remove some of the restrictions from some of the scenarios that we have. And so we were pretty excited about that. And if you want to learn more about this, you can go to the link at the bottom here and try it out there. You can get it all on NuGet. So it's just a matter of adding a NuGet package and you get access to these cool new controls. And that's sort of my little demo there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Morten. I have to say, I mean, I was muted on the Teams call. I was just saying thank you so much, Morten. That is really cool to see. I hope that the performance shine through from my Teams call into the live stream because, I mean, it's impressive. It's really just very cool to see. All right, so next up we have Jerome from the Uno platform. So I am going to go back to my slide quickly just to show his intro slide. So as I said, here we have Jerome from the Uno platform. He is the Uno platform CTO and a DevTech MVP, and he is going to be showing us just a bunch of cool things about Uno and WinUI. So let me go back to the Teams call here. Jerome, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. I'm going to be sharing my screen. That should be good. And so thank you for inviting us to the community call. It's amazing to see all those announcements from the Build conference and all about Uno and WinUI and WinUI 3 coming up. And we're especially interested in all of this at the Uno platform. And to continue where Kevin and Ryan left off during their presentation. I wanted to show you one little demo that was interesting. It's the Contoso Farm application that Kevin presented during the keynote, and it's an interesting application because we got access to that source code a while back, and we took that application, imported over to Uno, and it runs on the web. So that application has lots of things like shapes and all of features that are coming from WinUI, and then you also have the data grid that comes from the Community Toolkit. But it also you can also see that there are things like the number box control where you can have the expressions that can be added there. So it's something that's of interest to lots of people. So that's one of the applications that was much of interest to us for build and showing what Uno is able to do. Another one is, and Ryan talked about it during his talk, is the CH9 application, which is a showcase of the Uno platform for using WinUI. It's basically an RSS reader, but that shows the latest videos from the channel line, and it's fully open source. You can go fiddle with it, and if community contributions for that applications are welcome. So that's one of the good examples to look at when running for Uno platform. And Uno platform is all about getting WinUI and UWP everywhere, the WinRT API set. So it's all about reusing all the desktop down to IoT, and especially with Surface devices like the Surface Duo that is coming up later this year. And we're all about reusing all that code that's been developed for Surface Neo and the two-pane view stuff that has been pushed lately for those devices down to all other devices like Android devices. And at Uno, our goal is to have UWP and WinUI truly universal. And on Windows, it's all about getting Windows running there, WinUI 3, but getting that code that you have on your devices run over to the web using WebAssembly, iOS, and macOS now. We released support for macOS last week, and we even got to take the code that we did for the calculator and port it over, the Windows calculator that we ported over to iOS, and Android, and web last year, over to macOS. So you can go to the Mac App Store and download that application and test it over. There's still things to look at and to improve there, but it's a pretty good thing to look at. You also see that there's a Linux box at the end. It's something that we're going to be giving more details at UnoConf later this year, and it's probably going to be using some fancy techniques like Skia or Skia Sharp from Matthew Leibowitz, and probably GTK, or we're not sure yet. It depends on what the community is going to be asking for us to support. Another thing that people generally misunderstand is that Uno is all about being native, especially on iOS, Android, and Mac OS, and Linux when that comes. But the idea is that we're sitting on the shoulder of giants, and especially with regards to the use of Xamarin on iOS, Mac OS, and Android, and we're using all the APIs, and it's not a controlled environment where you cannot escape the box. And we built Uno in such a way that if you're trying to do something that Uno doesn't provide for whatever reason, because we have not implemented all the APIs that are coming from WinUI and WinRT, you can go through and just poke directly at what the system provides. As for the rendering strategy, that's the very important part, where we're sitting and taking the best of both worlds in terms of native rendering, using the actual controls, and pixel canvas rendering, where you're drawing all the pixels. And that approach, using lookless templates, and what the WPF people quite a few years back imagined properly, and you can style your controls and use the right ones at the right time, so that if you want to have pixel perfect designs, you can, but you can also have in the same application native controls. You can mix both at the same time. And I'm going to have a demo for that to show you what that means really. Developer group is very important. The idea is that you develop mostly on Windows, and you get your application up to 95% working, and then you can go over to the different platforms and use the actual features, like let's say the wallet, for instance, where you actually need to have a device for it to test. So you can deploy your application, develop your application using Windows, and the amazing tooling that the Windows team and the Visual Studio team have been developing for all those years, and is very fast, and port that over to the other platforms and test it over there. In terms of IDE support, we're basically supporting everything that's available here. The only difference is that now that that has been announced at Build, VS Code is going to be a new target. At this point, we're only supporting WebAssembly for VS Code, and code is going to be supported also for developing for iOS and Android, which is amazing for us. It's enabling lots of other targets and audiences that we've seen people interested in. Another question that we're getting also a lot is how do we stay viable as an OSS project? And we're basically using the Red Hat model. The paying customers are driving the priorities for us, and we're making sure that those paying customers have a say in what we're doing. And also, Inventive is using that application, is using Uno to create application, and has been using it for quite a while. So Uno's not going anywhere because we're using it for production applications. So I'm going to jump into demos now that I've talked about it. And the first demo is going to be, what's the experience for developing an application. So we're providing two things. We're providing .NET New templates. You can basically do .NET New Uno app, which uses the UWP WinUI 2 namespaces, and you get Uno app dash WinUI that uses a new API set from WinUI 3. And then you have also the VSEX that you can install from the extensions in Visual Studio. And what it's going to give you is the File New project for a cross-platform app, as well as for a cross-platform library. So just to save a bit of time, I've created the application already. So what you can see is that this is a WinUI app that I created using the .NET New command line templates, and this is using the Microsoft .UI.xaml namespaces. This is an actual WinUI app. So to show you that it actually does something, I'm going to make a small demo using let's say a slider, and for that slider, I've been doing that demo. That's always interesting to see what that means. So let's say I'm going to bind a value to that slider that's below, and I'm going to bind to that slider. So what that sample is going to be doing when I launch it, it's going to be just what you expect. So normally I would do the demo using the hot reload that is available in WinUI. But for WinUI 3, it's not available there. So there's a few things that need to be adjusted there. I'm assuming that Ryan and folks are going to be working on that for that scenario to be available properly. So now that the application is running, I'm going to go to WebAssembly and launch the SAM demo. So I built it a bit before, so that's why it's going faster. And you can see that it's the same thing, and it's data binding the position of the slider here to the element that's over there. So now if I go back to that application, so WebAssembly is interesting. It shows up pretty fast. And now what I'm going to do is start that application on iOS, and I'm going to be using the emulator that I'm connected to the Mac that's on the side. And what we are going to be seeing here is that application is showing up, but the problem is that because of the notch at the top, well, my slider is not working properly. So I can move it here, but I don't see the text that's at the top. So what I'm going to be doing is just add a margin at the top and move the content so it shows up properly. So that's the hot reload that we've added there, and it works on Android. It works on WebAssembly, and that's something that's pretty useful to work with when you're doing some things around. So hot reload is a key topic. So if you're using it, find issues, just log issues, and we'll take a look at those. Pretty amazing tech. And we're also looking at hot restart and all those features that are coming up for .NET 5 and the key features of .NET 5 coming up later this year. The second demo that I wanted to show you is what we call I call that a native style switcher. So that application, and we've been having debates about that one, about how to explain that properly. And the key takeaway of that application is it's built already, so it's going to be easier that way. The key takeaway of that application is that I can reuse controls that are part of the platform directly into my XAML. So you can see here I have a stack panel, and inside of that stack panel, I'm actually using a prefix namespace, in XML that is going to be ignored here by Windows, but it's going to be used by Uno when the application is being compiled. What that means is that on the left side here, I do have a UI slider, a UI switch that are available here already, and on the right side, I do have the WinUI controls that are using the same visual aspect that you would find on a native WinUI application. And to push a bit forward to show you that we can actually dynamically change the controls at runtime, I'm going to be clicking on that button here. And what it's going to be doing is going to be changing the visual styles of that control. So this is the native control that comes from iOS. And this is the control that comes from WinUI using the content that comes from WinUI. So that's the kind of controls, the control features that you're going to get, and you can move the content around, and you can really choose. And if you design as a picky, that's the way to go. And the way to change it is using basic styling. So I'm using a converter here, and that converter is basically providing two values if there's a Boolean that's provided, either native or either the XAML one. So you're in control. You can show up whatever you want. That's the very important part. And you can basically do the same thing for iOS and Android, and macOS. So you're gonna get iOS for iOS namespace, macOS, and others. So you can choose whatever you want to show at compile time, but you can also do that at runtime by adding controls to the visual tree. Another thing that has been very hot in terms of talking about WinUI and programming models is all about, what if I don't want to do XAML? What if I want to do something else? And we've been experimenting about that topic for quite a bit, and determining what we were able to do. And so you get a classic mode that's all about MVVM, and so that one's a bit verbose because of the property change. But if you use the new cool features of C#9, you can remove all that boilerplate for the property change and stuff. So that goes a lot faster. But there's also the fact that you can use Fabulous, and that model is very interesting, and especially now that there's a .NET 5 support with getting access to WinUI to Win32. That means that F# is going to be running super fast over there, and without any fancy things to work around. This is already available with something that we've been working on since the Fabulous team has been adding support for other programming models and other APIs. So you're going to see that Fabulous was originally using stack layouts because it was based on Xamarin Forms, and this is based on top of the Uno platforms and WinUI. Same thing for Blazor and Blazor Mobile. We've been doing a spike, and it's actually working. We have an application that is based off of a derivative of Blazor Mobile to use stack panel and text blocks and all of that. We're generating all the code underneath to be able to show you that. So the whole API set is available without anything. And the last one is a Flutter-like model that pretty much looks what Flutter is doing, with component rendering and stateful rendering with fully coded APIs, fully coded UIs. The difference between the two in Fabulous and Flutter, the one Fabulous is completely immutable. Flutter is a bit less because you have a state there, but that's the kind of things that we're looking at, and it's been a very hot topic. So if you have questions, please do ask. So thank you for the WinUI team to have invited us to the stream. And if you want to get started, there's platform that Uno gets started. We also have a course on Udemy. And if you want to learn more about what we're going to be doing for the next, with Skia, Linux, or other programming models, sign up for UnoConf, and you'll be the first to know. So that's it for me.
All right. Wow. I mean, seeing those native iOS controls and the WinUI controls in the same app, crazy. Very cool.
It is. It is very cool.
Wow. When you guys said WinUI everywhere, y'all really meant it.
Yeah, we're not done.
So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my PowerPoint here. Savoy, I think we're going to hand it over to you now to do a pretty quick Q&A session and just a quick announcement as well.
Fabulous. So yeah, let's get that announcement out of the way. As everyone knows, we've been active collecting feedback, running tons of focus groups, but that doesn't help us reach everyone. And if the people tuned into this talk are some of our most engaged, we'd love to hear from you as well. Please make sure that sometime after this call or later this week to go and take this survey here, because your opinions and feedback can help shape our platform product's future. So quick plug for that. And Anna, we can go ahead and cut the presentation and head right into Q&A. So one of the hottest questions we got on YouTube was for Jerome. Jerome, if you're ready to take it, people would love to know how you got an iOS emulator running on Windows.
It's not it's not the emulator. It's actually the remote simulator that comes from my Mac. So it's a feature that's been there in Xamarin for a while. So if you're not using it and you're connecting to your Mac and using VNC to share up your content, just go to your features. Go to your options in Visual Studio, and it's going to enable you to see the simulator there. So I wish it would be available, but if you want to be able to develop without having a Mac, it goes you halfway or a third of the way, because there's some scenarios are not supported. But the hot restart feature, you plug in an Apple device on your PC, connect it to iTunes, and then you can deploy from your Windows to your iOS device without having a Mac.
Perfect. And Jerome, while we have you here, one more question came in. I should mention that first one came from James Croft, so thank you, James. The next one comes from Terry Cox, who wants to know, what's the loading time like on Uno for complex apps in WebAssembly?
So this is a moving topic, and when I'm saying moving, it's extremely fast-moving topic. So we've been looking at what the Mono team has been doing, and if you've taken a close look at what the Xamarin Android team has been doing with the startup tracing feature, this is going to be a game changer for Mono for WebAssembly apps. And we're actually developing right now, and there's a PR that just a few minutes ago that came into the Mono repo that's going to enable what is called a profile guided AOT. And this is going to be reducing the size of the applications by 50%, pretty much, and it's going to enable WebAssembly AOT to be in more places. So that's going to be a fun thing. So take a look at what we're doing for performance. We know at this point size is too big and performance is too low. And as soon as the Mono team and the Uno team are pushing in that direction, it's gonna look a lot better.
Very good. All right. So Morten, if you're able to join us, I have one question coming in from you, and I think I flipped the names earlier. This one here is from Terry Cox. With your demo, Terry would love to know, how are you distributing? Is it through sideloading?
The app itself? Well, yeah, we can sideload. You can of course put your app in the store. The SDK itself is distributed on NuGet, so you get to choose how you want to distribute your app. So you can do like MSIX or just Xcopy deployment. So if you do .NET Core 2, you can do like a single exe. It's really up to you, because I just build the component that allows you to render this and do these analysis. You get to build the app, so you choose how you want to distribute your app.
Awesome. All right, and Anna, a question for you. This comes from Alexander Oliveira, who asks, where can I find a guide to get started with WinUI?
Okay, wow, first question for me, cool. So we have a website, it's ak.ms/WinUI. That has all the basic info, and we actually recently pushed an about page that has a lot of details about what is WinUI and how to get started based on the type of app that you're interested in creating, UWP or Win32. We have, all the relevant doc links there. So I think that's a really good place to start. Our WinUI docs are also a great place to start. Either way, yeah.
Awesome. Great question. Now, I have seen a lot of questions come in about the swag and apparel you've seen on this call. Jerome, where can people get a hold of some Uno swag?
That's going to be a question for our CMO, but yeah, it's all about sending something to info@platform.uno, and we'll send out some swag. And if you want to get sure to have some swag, contributions are welcome.
Great answer, great answer. And we've seen some for the WinUI stuff that I'm wearing today too, and many of the other team members. Go ahead and head over to our Twitter, Windows UI, and you can find a link to where you can get a hold of some of that. So now I would like to turn a question over to Ryan Demopoulos. Ryan, earlier in the chat, Simon asked, when will GA happen? GA for general availability.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I know in the past we've talked about how GA was aiming for November, and we're kind of pivoting a little bit on how we think about GA in general. So it's not just a timing question, it's a how we think about it question. November's release will still be a production-ready version of WinUI. We're going to call it Preview 4 because it's not going to have everything that we feel should be in like a 3.0 sort of RTM release. But Preview 4 will sort of like, maybe you can call it a mini GA in the sense that you can now use it in production apps, and it'll be stable and it'll be forward compatible. When we actually start calling WinUI 3.0, I think that is an unknown timetable. I don't think it's going to stretch on for a really long amount of time, but we want to interact with the community, make sure we get all the proper features into it, and really just complete it before we put that 3.0 label on it. So, you know, sometime into 2021, I don't think it'll be deep.
Very good. Another question for you, Ryan. I'll combine one from James Croft and Matt Lacey, who asked something similar earlier. So Matt asks, what's the long-term naming of projects? Is that fixed? Going forward, will the option still be WinUI in desktop and WinUI in UWP? To springboard off of that, James wants to know if WinUI will be the standard for Windows App Project templates in VS.
Yeah, there's kind of two parts to that one. So first of all, I think it's important for everyone to understand that WinUI 3 is one product. So there's not going to be separate products for desktop and UWP. It's really just one UI framework that now works in both styles of apps. So they're not going to be versioned separately. They're not going to be shipped separately. It's all one thing, and that's called WinUI 3. And then, sorry, I'm trying to remember the second part of that, Savoy.
Oh, it's whether WinUI apps will become the default template in VS.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly going to be WinUI project templates that we add to Visual Studio, and you know, it's going to be what we generally recommend to start new applications. There will be times when you will still want to write like a WinForms app or a WPF app because there might be some specific thing you need there, or you just are familiar with that. But yeah, we're going to have our own set of WinUI templates, and you'll be making WinUI apps when we feel that we're ready to have that experience built into Visual Studio.
Perfect. And we are on to rapid fire with 4 minutes left. So Ryan, I'll give you 30 seconds for this. Yep. Many people are asking about input validation. Is that already out? Is that in WinUI 3.0? What are the plans there?
Yeah, I believe it was in our alpha. So that's one of the advantages of WinUI 3. We weren't able to add input validation to WinUI 2. And the reason is input validation requires work done in the underlying layers of the XAML framework. But since WinUI 3 ships the whole XAML framework, we were able to add input validation.
Fabulous. And that one came from several contributors on GitHub. Another one from GitHub, Marcel asks, what are the immediate plans after WinUI 3 releases? What are the next steps the team's planning to take?
Well, I would say the safest and easiest thing is 3.1 and 3.2. And there will be more features that we want to add. I think us being open source by then, you guys will help shape the direction of what those releases are. We have other things that we want to explore. We've talked in past calls about cross-platform. We have no firm plans on that right now, but we know that that's of interest to people. Clearly, Jerome's section here around all the different platforms that they support has sparked a lot of interest there too. So yeah, we'll see. We don't have firm plans post WinUI 3, let's say.
Sure. All right. Thanks, Ryan. So Antonio asks, will there be integration between WinUI 3 and Maui? Will we be able to create WinUI 3 apps through Maui? What's the convergence story around the XAML dialects?
There's a couple questions in there. So the first one is, will Maui use WinUI 3? I think the answer is eventually it will, and we're working with the Maui team on that. Just to know, Maui is effectively a rebrand of Xamarin Forms, and Xamarin Forms already uses WinUI 2. So once WinUI 3 matures more and Maui can start betting on it, we think that we'll start to see that happen. And then the second part was around the XAML dialects, which is kind of like a XAML standard sort of question. I don't know of the, I'm not up to speed, let's say, on like the very latest plans from the Maui team on what they plan on doing. WinUI will certainly keep the same dialect that it has from UWP XAML, which is actually extremely similar to Silverlight and extremely similar to WPF in the past. So that's kind of a common lineage of how XAML sounds. And I would follow up with the Maui folks to see what their latest thinking is on what they're going to be doing, because I know that they've been discussing that.
Very good. And last question, since we have 1 minute left. Ryan, Steve Parker would like to know which preview will add a WinUI and UWP support with .NET 5.
I don't know the answer to that. It won't be this year. We are still trying to figure out exactly the right time to help and provide, and exactly what the right path is to provide UWP developers to go over to that. It'll be .NET Native for this year, including for Preview 4 in November. A big piece of this is Project Reunion, which Kevin Gallo mentioned at Build this year. So, Reunion will provide a path to the latest .NET, whether that's .NET 5 or .NET 6. Timetables are still being worked out.
Very good. All right, so that'll have to end our Q&A. Thanks again for everyone here, especially to our guests for joining us and fielding those questions live. Anna, I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Savoy, for managing these questions. Thanks to all our team members who I know have been up at crazy hours doing stuff for Build. Thanks for contributing. And, of course, a big thank you to our sort of guest stars on this episode of the Community Call. It is just really great to see your work with WinUI coming to life. So I don't want to keep us too over time. We'll end the stream right now. But big thank you to everybody. Thanks for watching. Enjoy Build, and we'll see you soon. All right.
We'll have a special call next week.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.